A real wife wouldn't lock doors inside her own husband's house. What are you hiding? Hearing those words spoken with a mocking sneer right to my face by my mother-in-law. Brenda. I did not raise my voice. It had been 7 weeks since she used a fake home renovation as an excuse to barge into the empty half of our duplex with 6 massive suitcases. She didn't know that I had bought this property entirely with my own savings before the wedding, and she had absolutely no idea that I had just pulled the pharmacy records proving she threw away my 6-year-old son's emergency asthma inhaler. Her comfortable, entitled life in my house was about to come to a screeching halt. If you have ever had to protect your home from people who use the word family like a weapon, tell me where you are listening from in the comments. I am Megan, and I read every single one. Now, let's go back to the Tuesday it all started. I stood in the kitchen, wiping the dust off an old iPad. Timothy, my husband, had asked me to clear the data so his mother could use it while staying next door. I tapped the screen to perform a factory reset. The Messages app was still open. The timestamp on the visible thread read 4 years ago. I did not go looking for secrets, but the text on the glowing screen was impossible to miss. I have nothing left, Brenda had written. If you don't wire the mortgage payment, I am just going to take my pills and go to sleep. Timothy's reply sat right beneath it. Sent. Please don't do anything. Mom. I scrolled up. 3 more threats of exactly the same nature. Spread across 8 months. Every single one ended with a bank transfer confirmation from Timothy. I set the tablet down on the granite counter. He had never mentioned this. I was 35, a pharmacy technician who dealt with anxious patients all day, and I recognized a hostage situation when I saw one. Timothy was not being generous. He was being extorted. 3 hours later, a taxi idled in our driveway. Brenda stepped out. She did not bring a single box of renovation supplies. She brought 6 oversized suitcases. Timothy rushed out the front door, grabbing 3 bags at once. Come on, Megan, he called back to me. Smile. She is going through a lot. I walked over to the hallway medicine cabinet. Ethan, our 6-year-old son, had mild asthma. I took his emergency inhaler and placed it on the highest shelf, out of the way of the dust and chaos that was about to fill our home. The landline on the kitchen wall rang. I picked it up. Did she make it? The voice belonged to Courtney, my husband's younger sister. She just walked in, I said. A long pause hung on the line. Good luck, Courtney said, and hung up before I could ask what she meant. In the living room, Brenda dropped her coat over the back of my favorite chair. She looked around the space I had paid for with my own money, smiled, and said, "This will do perfectly." The first electric bill arrived on the 12th of the month. A normal summer month for our unit usually cost me $94. The paper in my hand demanded $417. Through the shared wall, I could hear the low, mechanical hum of a commercial-grade baking oven. Brenda insisted on running it until 2 in the morning to test recipes for a business she hadn't actually started. Outside, a thick orange extension cord snaked from the garage outlet to the sleek white electric SUV she had parked on my grass. I set the envelope down on the counter. I had bought this duplex with $82,000 in cash. It was every single cent I had scraped together from 8 years of working double shifts at the pharmacy, long before Timothy and I ever met. My name was the only one on the deed. Now, I was logging into my personal banking portal, transferring money out of my emergency fund just to keep the lights on for a woman who treated my home like a complimentary resort. I found Timothy by the coffee maker the next morning. I folded the bill and slid it next to his travel mug. He looked at the number. He did not look at me. She is going through a rough patch. Megan, he said, staring intently at the kitchen tile. Just give her some grace. The senior partners are breathing down my neck today. He grabbed his briefcase and walked briskly toward his home office. The pattern from the iPad was playing out right in front of me. He would pay whatever price she demanded, as long as he didn't have to look her in the eye and say no. I threw the empty coffee filter in the trash. At 9 o'clock, I called a local electrician. He came out that afternoon and charged me $215 to install a separate digital submeter on the exterior wall. It did not stop the usage, but it gave me a hard, undeniable record of exactly what Brenda was consuming. Timothy noticed the new gray metal box when he came down for dinner. He stopped in the hallway, his jaw tight. "You installed a meter?" he asked. His tone was not loud, but it was entirely cold. "You are treating my mother like a hostile tenant." He did not wait for my answer. He walked into our bedroom, grabbed his pillow and a spare blanket, and went back upstairs to the guest couch. He slept there for the next 5 nights, punishing me for drawing a line. I thought the financial drain was the worst of it. Then I found her purse. The hallway between the 2 units smelled heavily of burnt sugar and cheap vanilla extract. It was Thursday morning, exactly 8 days after Brenda had moved her 6 suitcases into the empty half of my duplex. I was running the vacuum along the baseboards. Brenda had left her oversized leather purse perched on the very edge of the narrow console table near the front door. I pulled the vacuum cord around the corner. The thick black wire caught the back leg of the table. The purse tipped over and hit the hardwood floor. A silver tube of lipstick rolled against the wall. A handful of loose coins scattered across the rug. A thick, letter-sized envelope slid out of the unzipped side pocket. It rested face up on the floorboards. There was no postage stamp on the envelope. It had a heavy red stamp across the top left corner that read, "Final Notice of Default." I turned off the vacuum. The sudden silence in the hallway was absolute. I picked up the envelope. The flap was already torn open, so I pulled out the small stack of papers inside. The letterhead belonged to a company called Apex Wellness International, a multi-level marketing corporation that sold dietary supplements. The document was a formal demand for payment. Brenda was listed as a former Diamond Tier distributor. Her account balance was highlighted in bold black ink. She owed $41,250. Attached to the back of the legal demand was a printed email. It was dated 3 weeks ago. The sender was Richard, Brenda's older brother. I read the 3 lines of text printed on the page. "You took out a second mortgage on Mom's house for this scam. Brenda, the bank is foreclosing on her next month. Do not call my phone again. Do not come to my house. We have absolutely nothing left to give you." I stared at the black ink on the white paper. There was no home renovation. There was no contractor delaying a kitchen remodel. Brenda was completely broke. She had scammed her own family, drained her mother's equity, and burned every bridge she had left. She had nowhere else to go. 2 nights ago, Timothy had stood in my kitchen and told me I was the reason this house felt tense. He had packed his pillow, moved to the guest couch, and accused me of treating his mother like a hostile tenant. He said I was paranoid. He said I always looked for the worst in people, and that my lack of grace was tearing his family apart. I folded the papers back into the envelope. The paranoia was just observation. The tension in the duplex was not coming from me. The problem was $41,000 deep. My ability to see the threat did not make me the source of it. I was simply the only person in the family looking at a woman who had run out of victims. Except she had not run out of victims. She was sitting in my living room, running up my electric bill, looking at a piece of prime real estate she assumed belonged to her son. I slipped the envelope into my scrub pocket. I walked straight down the hall toward the home office. It was 8:45 in the morning. I was going to hand the paper directly to Timothy. He could not deny a printed legal demand and an email from his own uncle. I reached the heavy oak door. Right as my hand touched the brass knob, the door yanked open from the inside. Timothy nearly collided with me. He was breathing fast. His suit jacket was draped over one arm, and his tie was hanging loose around his neck. He was holding his phone away from his ear, looking completely panicked. "Timothy," I said, pulling the envelope from my pocket. "Look at this." He shoved past me, marching toward the front door. "Not now. Megan, you need to read this right now. She is not renovating a house." He spun around. His face was flushed. "Arthur just called," he snapped, naming the senior partner at his law firm. "He pulled an emergency meeting with the executive committee. I have to be downtown in 20 minutes or my promotion is dead." He grabbed his car keys from the hook. "I cannot deal with your drama today," he said, opening the front door. "Just leave my mother alone." He walked out. The door slammed shut behind him. I stood alone in the hallway. The paper in my pocket was heavy. The coughing started at 2:14 in the morning. It was not a normal cough. It was a tight, shallow wheeze that echoed down the hallway of the duplex. I threw off the covers and ran to Ethan's room. He was sitting up in bed, clutching his chest. His face was pale in the glow of his nightlight. I reached for the top shelf of his bookcase. My hand hit empty wood. I checked the nightstand drawer. Empty. I checked the bathroom counter. Empty. The blue albuterol inhaler I had placed on the high shelf 3 days ago was gone. I sat Ethan upright, turned on the hot shower to steam up the small bathroom, and held him against my chest while his breathing slowly stabilized. It took 45 minutes. He fell back asleep in my arms. I did not close my eyes for the rest of the night. At 6:30, I walked into the kitchen. Brenda was standing by the sink, pouring a cup of decaf. I pulled the lid off the main trash can to throw away a paper towel. Sitting right on top of the wet coffee grounds was Ethan's blue inhaler. I reached in and pulled it out. "It was cluttering up the shelf," Brenda said. She didn't even look up from her mug. "I tidied up his room yesterday. A boy his age doesn't need to depend on plastic crutches. He needs to toughen up." She took a sip of her coffee. I looked at the wet plastic in my hand. By paying the electric bills in silence and walking away with that debt notice in my pocket yesterday, I thought I was maintaining a fragile peace. Instead, I had given her a green light. My endurance was the exact signal she needed to push further. She had crossed the line from financial theft to physical endangerment just to prove she owned the space. I got to the pharmacy at 8:15. My hands did not shake as I logged into the dispensing system. I typed in Ethan's patient ID. The screen flashed a red warning immediately. The insurance plan allowed one emergency inhaler every 90 days. This would be his third request in 30 days. I didn't call the pediatrician's office for a prior authorization. I used my pharmacy technician override code to bypass the insurance block and process the medication out of pocket. It cost $74. I hit the print command. The thermal paper slipped out of the machine, detailing the exact time, the date, and the bold text reading "Emergency Override." I folded the long strip of paper and put it in my scrub pocket. Timothy called at 11:40. I answered on the second ring. "My mother said you dug through the trash this morning just to start a fight," he said. His voice was hushed and clipped, like he was hiding in an empty conference room at the firm. "Megan, please, I have 3 briefs due at 5. Why are you making a scene over a cheap piece of plastic?" "It is a prescription medical device," I said. "It's $20, he snapped. "Just buy another one. Stop treating her like a criminal. You have to stop pushing everyone to the edge over nothing." I listened to the static on the line. He was annoyed that his workday was interrupted. He did not ask if his 6-year-old son was breathing normally. "Okay, Timothy," I said. I ended the call. I didn't cry. I walked to the back counter where I kept my personal bag. I pulled out the envelope containing Brenda's multi-level marketing default notice. I had failed to show it to him yesterday when the senior partner interrupted us. That envelope was never going to him in private. I placed the 3 printed pharmacy receipts for the emergency inhalers on top of the $417 electric bill. Then I placed the heavy debt notice on top of that. The stack of paper was less than half an inch thick. I slid it into a clear plastic folder. I was no longer waiting for my husband to wake up. I was building a case. It was 4:15 on a Thursday afternoon. The duplex was quiet except for the low hum of the television in the living room. Brenda had taken over the main viewing area. She watched daytime soap operas at a volume that rattled the picture frames on the shared wall. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen island, finishing a small bowl of applesauce. He had been quiet since the asthma attack 3 nights ago. He kept his toys inside his backpack now, refusing to leave them on the rug. Suddenly, he dropped his spoon. He grabbed his stomach. "Mom," he whispered. He slid off the tall bar stool and ran down the short hallway toward the half-bath under the stairs. I wiped the counter with a damp cloth, listening to the rapid patter of his sneakers on the hardwood. Then, I heard the frantic rattling of a doorknob. I dropped the cloth. I walked around the corner. Ethan was standing in front of the white-paneled door, twisting the brass knob back and forth. It wouldn't budge. He bounced on his toes, his face turning red, tears pooling in the corners of his eyes. The door was locked from the inside. Brenda sat on the beige sofa 10 feet away. She held a ceramic mug of Earl Grey tea. The little silver spare key that usually sat on the mantel was resting on the glass coffee table, right next to her saucer. She watched her 6-year-old grandson cry. She took a slow sip of her tea. She did not reach for the key. The picture clicked into perfect focus. I did not ask her to unlock it. I did not raise my voice. I walked back into the kitchen, pulled open the utility drawer next to the refrigerator, and took out a yellow-handled flathead screwdriver. I walked back into the hallway, knelt in front of the bathroom door, and wedged the steel tip into the horizontal groove of the privacy lock. I twisted my wrist sharply. The mechanism popped with a loud metallic crack. The door swung open. Ethan darted inside and slammed it shut behind him. I stood up. I kept the screwdriver in my right hand. Brenda set her mug down on the glass table. The ceramic clinked loudly in the quiet room. She stood up to face me. The fragile elderly act vanished. Her shoulders squared. A slow, deliberate smirk spread across her face. A real wife wouldn't lock doors inside her own husband's house. "What are you hiding?" She delivered the line perfectly. It was designed to provoke a screaming match. It was designed to make me lose my temper so she could call Timothy and play the victim again. I didn't take the bait. I looked at her the way you look at a math problem that finally makes sense. Throwing away the asthma inhaler wasn't a mistake caused by differing generational standards of cleanliness. Deliberately locking the only downstairs bathroom while a 6-year-old cried wasn't an accident. It was a calculated siege. She was trying to make the house so hostile, so thoroughly unlivable, that I would break, give up my boundaries, and surrender the deed to her son. I put the screwdriver in my scrub pocket. If I dialed 911 right now, Timothy would rush home from the law firm. He would stand in the entryway, smooth his expensive tie, and tell the police officers it was just a domestic misunderstanding between his stressed wife and his aging mother. He would protect her. The law required physical bruises. Emotional terrorism in a residential duplex was not a felony. I needed a judge that Brenda could not manipulate. I needed a jury that Timothy could not dismiss. I walked back into the kitchen and picked up my cell phone from the counter. I opened the clear plastic folder sitting next to the fruit bowl. I looked at the 3 pharmacy receipts and the $417 electric bill. I unlocked my screen. I scrolled down my contact list and pressed the green button next to Courtney's name. It rang twice. "Hello," she answered. "Courtney, it's Megan," I said. "I need you to look at some documents." A brief silence hung on the line. "I'll be there tomorrow," she said. Courtney parked in my driveway at 8:30 on Friday morning. I walked out to the porch and handed her the clear plastic folder. She read the multi-level marketing default notice first. Then she turned the page and stared at the 3 pharmacy receipts for her nephew's emergency inhalers. She stood in the morning sun for a long time. She did not ask a single question or try to defend the woman who raised her. She just looked at the empty spot on the curb and realized her mother's white SUV was missing. Brenda had left the duplex before 7. I had heard her phone vibrating relentlessly against the kitchen counter at dawn. The creditors were closing in on her $41,000 debt. She knew my boundaries were no longer flexible after the bathroom door cracked open. She needed the weakest link, and she needed a public stage to force his hand. Courtney and I drove downtown in my car. We stepped off the elevator onto the 14th floor of the law firm at 9:45. The reception area was a quiet expanse of polished marble and hushed voices. We didn't have to ask the front desk where Timothy was. The performance was already underway. The firm used floor-to-ceiling glass walls for their executive meeting spaces. Inside Conference Room B, Brenda was putting on a masterclass. She had scrubbed off her heavy foundation and dark eyeliner. She wore a faded, oversized gray cardigan that swallowed her shoulders, making her look fragile and deeply worn. She was weeping hysterically, gripping Timothy's forearm across the wide mahogany table. Sitting directly across from them was Arthur, the senior partner. The heavy glass door was cracked open a few inches. Brenda's sobs echoed into the pristine hallway. "She locks the doors to keep me out of the bathrooms." "Timmy," Brenda wailed, her voice cracking perfectly. "She hides the groceries. I just need to get away from her cruelty. If you just make her sign the duplex over to us, the bank will give me an equity loan. I can buy a small condo. Please, you have to save your mother." Timothy's face was the color of wet ash. He glanced frantically at Arthur. The senior partner was leaning back in his leather chair, watching the breakdown with a tight, highly judgmental frown. Timothy had spent 5 years climbing the corporate ladder. He cared about his professional image more than he cared about the truth, his son's oxygen, or my property. To stop the embarrassing spectacle in front of his boss, he would surrender everything. He swallowed hard. He opened his mouth to give her the house. I pushed the glass door. The heavy glass door swung open. The hinges were completely silent. Arthur, the senior partner, looked up from his notepad. Timothy froze. His mouth was still half open, the words of surrender dying in his throat. I did not introduce myself. I walked straight to the center of the mahogany conference table. I opened the clear plastic folder. I placed the documents down one by one, sliding them forward like playing cards. First, the multi-level marketing default notice for $41,250. Second, the electric bill for $417. Brenda's weeping stopped instantly. The tears vanished. She looked at the papers, then glared at me. "Timmy," she said. Her voice dropped the fragile act entirely, snapping like a dry twig. "Get her out of here. This is a private meeting." Footsteps clicked on the marble floor behind me. Courtney walked into the room. Brenda's face instantly brightened. The victim mask slid right back on. "Courtney, sweetie, thank God. Tell Arthur how this woman treats me. Tell him I need the equity." Courtney did not look at Arthur. She did not look at her brother. She walked to the table and picked up the last items I had placed on the wood. The 3 thermal paper receipts from the pharmacy system. She held the small, white slips of paper in her right hand. Her knuckles were white. "You threw away Ethan's emergency inhaler," Courtney said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like shattered glass. "You bankrupted Grandma for a supplement scam. You extorted Timmy for 4 years. And you threw away a little boy's heir so you could steal his mother's house." Brenda's confident smile froze into a grotesque grimace. Her jaw moved. but no sound came out. She reached out, gripping the thick edge of the mahogany table. Her hands began to shake violently against the polished wood. Her knees simply stopped working. She slumped backward, dropping heavily into one of the leather executive chairs. "Do not call my phone again," Courtney said, looking down at her. "I am changing the number at noon." Silence settled over the room. Arthur sat at the head of the table. He did not ask for an explanation. He did not offer a polite excuse about family matters. He reached out and slowly closed his leather portfolio. He looked at Timothy. It was a long, unblinking stare. It was not a look of professional disappointment. It was the quiet, absolute disgust reserved for a man who allowed his own 6-year-old son to be suffocated while he worried about his promotion. Timothy stood paralyzed in his expensive suit. He looked at his boss, then at his sister, and finally at me. He had nothing left to sell. The police cruiser idled in the driveway at 9 on Tuesday morning. The local magistrate had signed the emergency eviction order the day prior. Brenda carried her 6 oversized suitcases down the front steps one by one. She did not have Courtney's help. She did not have the white SUV, which had been repossessed from my lawn on Monday afternoon. She loaded her bags into the back of a yellow cab in complete silence. Timothy stood in the foyer. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt. The polished lawyer from the glass conference room was gone. Arthur had quietly removed his name from the executive track 24 hours after the meeting. Timothy picked up his leather duffel bag. I handed him a heavy manila envelope. The divorce petition was 40 pages long. He looked down at the thick paper. He opened his mouth, his shoulders slumping, finally ready to offer the apology he should have given 42 days ago. I did not wait to hear it. I stepped back and pushed the heavy door shut. The lock clicked. The duplex was entirely silent. The commercial baking oven was gone. The television was off. I called the local locksmith at noon. He arrived in a white van and spent 2 hours replacing every brass deadbolt with heavy, reinforced steel. I paid him $380 in cash. At 10:30 that night. I checked on Ethan. He was sound asleep. His chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. The blue inhaler sat on his nightstand, completely untouched. I walked back downstairs. The hallway was dark. I stepped up to the front door and gripped the cold steel of the new deadbolt. I turned it to the right. I turned it again. I turned it a third time, testing the absolute resistance of the metal against the door frame. I stood alone in the quiet house, staring at the lock. You can't heal a marriage with a man who uses your patience as a human shield. I know exactly what you were screaming at your screen right now. Why did she wait 42 days? Why didn't she pack their bags and throw them on the lawn the exact second that $400 electric bill arrived? It is easy to judge from the outside, but when you are inside a toxic family dynamic, you are not dealing with logic. You are dealing with a slot machine. Toxic people do not abuse you 100% of the time. If they did, leaving would be simple. Instead, they give you just enough normal days to keep you sitting at the machine. A polite conversation over coffee. A day where the television isn't too loud. A husband who promises things will get better soon. You keep pulling the lever, spending your own sanity, hoping the jackpot of a peaceful, normal family will finally drop. Megan wasn't stupid. She was addicted to the breadcrumbs of hope her husband kept dropping. But the moment that hope broke, Megan executed a masterclass in self-defense. Let's break down exactly what she did right. First, she built the silent paper trail. When Brenda left the multi-level marketing debt notice on the floor, Megan did not confront her. When the electric bill skyrocketed, she did not scream. She installed a submeter and collected the paper. She gathered undeniable proof of the financial drain. Second, she secured the pharmacy bypass. When her son's airway was threatened, Megan did not waste time arguing with a woman who threw away medical equipment. She used her professional access to pull the emergency override and printed the receipts. She documented physical endangerment with time-stamped medical records. Finally, she executed the boardroom drop. Megan knew that calling the police to the duplex would just allow Timothy to play the peacemaker and sweep the abuse under the rug. She took the evidence to the one place he could not control. She dropped it on the mahogany table in front of the senior partner and the golden child sister. She stripped away his professional shield and let the truth speak for itself. Your home is a sanctuary. It is not a rehabilitation center for adults who refuse to take accountability. And it is certainly not a hostage negotiation. If this story struck a nerve, or if you have ever had to change the locks to buy back your peace of mind, drop a comment below and tell me where you are listening from. Subscribe to the channel, and remember to protect your space.